All right, guys, we are back. I'm sorry if you're in the toilet and you can probably hear my voice and you're like trying to pull your pants up and running back at me right now, but don't panic. We're not going to launch into it right away. I have here Tanya and Brian from Losmandy. These guys, if you don't know who they are, why are you even watching them? You should know who Losmandy is. These guys are actually based in Burbank, California, and it's always a bucket of fun going over there because it's like looking into Scott's head, with all the treasures and all the little trinkets and cool stuff everywhere. And it's always fun just going in there because you never know what Scott's going to say or what he's going to do or how excited or not excited he is. But today he has got a reason to be excited. That's why he's got you two here, right?
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah. So introduce yourself to everybody out there. So Tanya, you first.
Hi, this is Tanya, Losmandy. I do a lot of the just the managing of the office and everything. And I've been here for about 4.5 years. I just wanted to let everybody, do you want to introduce yourself, Brian? Here's Brian Valente, our newest member of our team. He's amazing. He's our Gemini guru. Do you want to say hi, Brian?
Hi.
Hi.
I did just briefly, I've been a Losmandy customer for about 10, 12 years now, using a lot of Losmandy products. I live about 20 minutes away. I think I went over there and asked them enough questions, enough time. They're like, hey, maybe you come help us out with all the answers we gave you now.
So you're the creepy guy that was hanging around the street corner looking around.
Yes, exactly. We just
That's me, yes.
Yeah, so he's been a great addition to our team, that's for sure. We're very happy with him on board. So basically, I'm just here just to say hello, introduce myself, and letting you know that we are still working. We're still manufacturing, but we're just keeping the doors closed to the public, but we are shipping. So anything that you need from Woodland Hills and Losmandy, just give them a call. If they don't have it in stock, we'll get it shipped out to you from here. We drop ship also for them all the time. Because we do have everything, we have everything in stock right now. We've got some mounts. We're getting a little bit low on some of them, but if you get order in with Woodland Hills, they'll be able to get it out for you. And Woodland Hills is offering a free GPS unit with every mount order up until May 16th, which is great. I mean, it's a great addition to the Gemini unit. It does puts all your information in there for you, especially if you're really portable.
Losmandy GPS unit, right? Not just third party.
Right. They're going to include the Losmandy. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. They won't throw some rinky dinky one
Yeah,
in there.
no, let me make 100% sure you guys out there understand this. It's if you order a mount through us only, we will give you a GPS unit. It has to be a complete mount. It can't be half a mount, 3/4 of a mount, or just a counterweight shaft. You've got to buy the whole mount. We at Woodland Hills Camera and Telescope will give you a GPS unit, and believe you me, that thing is handy when you're running around in the middle of nowhere going, where am I?
Yes, very much so. So it's $150 value. Thank you, Woodland Hills, for including that in your mount orders. We appreciate it. We'll get those mounts out to you. We've got the GM811s, G11s, and GM8G all in stock. The G11 GT, the big mount, should be ready to go, or we call it the G11T now. The G11T should be ready in about 4 to 6 weeks. We're finishing up production on that now. So if you have any questions about lead times, you can call everybody at Woodland Hills. We have a great working relationship with them. So, and I think that is it from me, Tanya. But I will still be here at the end of our hour, if you have any questions for me. But everybody at Woodland Hills knows our products really well, so you can get great support through them. I think, one other thing, sorry. I wanted to let you know that Brian has set up on our store.losmandy.com webpage. He has set up a mailing list that we are going to start. I don't know when he'll start doing that, but he has set it up. So get your name on there. What that's going to do, it's going to allow you to get new announcements for products, new software updates, anything that we need to announce. That's the way to be able to get that information delivered to your mailbox, your virtual mailbox. So we just set that up. Please get signed up on that store.losmandy.com. And then also, if you're not a Losmandy subscriber on YouTube, you should definitely get on that. That's a great, we put a lot of tutorials on there. We're trying to put one up at least once every week. You know, people have questions about stuff and things like that. So, and then we also do have our Facebook page, which we do some technical, and we like to share photos and images from our customers. So get on there. It's Losmandy Astronomical on Facebook. So don't have an Instagram yet. Hopefully get that up soon. So please join all 3 of those platforms and get the information that you're looking for. Brian, do you want to go into it now, or is there anything else I'm missing?
No, I think we're good. I mean, we're going to do a little bit more of an educational part now that Tanya's kind of ran through where we're at with Losmandy. And Simon, I'm going to, in a second, just share my screen, but not quite yet.
You go and share your screen whenever you are ready.
All right, I appreciate that. So I gave a presentation. Well, hi, everybody. Brian again, Losmandy. I gave a Zoom presentation about 2 weeks ago, maybe it was a week ago. I don't know. Time just seems to, I gotta lose track of time here. But I gave a presentation talking about the use of micro routers and how to get more advantage from your Gemini in using this. And it was so well received that I'm gonna give a bit of an encore presentation with a few updates here. Now, what I'm talking about, of course, I'm going to talk about the Losmandy Gemini, which is the astronomical computer that comes along with our mouse. Looks like this, very handy device. It's got all sorts of connections we'll talk about here in a second. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, I think, are going to be relevant for pretty much any type of equipment you're going to be using. I recently have been trying to figure out more and more how to do remote imaging, or I guess sort of a combination of remote and automated imaging, because like a lot of folks, I'm basically lazy and I don't want to freeze my butt off at night, and I want everything to handle itself. So if something goes wrong, or if I need to check on something, I'd like to do it from my living room or from my bedroom or wherever I happen to be hanging out. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I'm going to kind of walk through this. Hopefully, Simon, are we okay on that? Do you see it okay? Okay. So on the Losmandy unit itself, there's a bunch of different ways that you can connect to use it for doing imaging with your computer, of course. There is a serial connection, which is a traditional RS-232 type of port, of course. There's a USB connection, which is kind of what we're all used to, and I think is kind of the de facto standard. But in addition to those, we actually have an Ethernet port on the Losmandy. Whoops, sorry about that. Which is down here. I was hoping that this wouldn't get cut off, but it did. Anyways, we have an actual Ethernet port on the Gemini, and it is a full network capable TCP/IP connection. And this is really what we're going to be focused on, how to take advantage of today. Now, some of my setup, I'm going to go through. The actual setup might be a little bit different because I'm having to do a network connection here for the Zoom meeting, and I can't. Last time I did this, I pressed a button and I disconnected from the Zoom meeting. So I think I'm going to show you a slide version of this instead of the disconnect, and you guys are going to be wondering where I am. So I'm going to talk about this micro router, and Simon, I'm going to show this real quick on my camera here. So this is a micro router. It is actually a fully capable, it's tiny, by the way. It weighs almost nothing. It's a plastic one. It weighs maybe 3 ounces. I don't know. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? It's got a LAN port. It's got a WAN port. It's powered by micro USB, which of course is going to be handy for us. It's got all sorts of capabilities, and it's about 20 bucks right now. I think it's $20.50. I mean, it's astonishingly cheap, right? And this is, although I'm not really focused so much on this specific one, I am going to talk about it, but a lot of routers like this are going to do what I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to talk about how to use this particular one. So Simon, if we can go back to my presentation. I'm going to talk about the advantages of using a micro router in your connections and how to set up your Gemini. And this is not, I'm not talking about remote, and I'm not talking about going to a location. I'm actually talking about both of those and at home as well. And there are a bunch of advantages that we're going to go through. I'm going to show you how to do this. First of all, it's relatively easy to set up. I'm going to show you probably in a couple of slides how to do this. It is super portable. So once you have this up and running, you can literally unplug your telescope, your mount, your computer, take everything, go out to a remote location, plug it back in, and everything is going to work. You don't have to reconfigure things. You don't have to realize that your home network is no longer available. What I'm going to describe to you works, and it is portable, right? And portable in that you can use your home network as part of it, but you don't require it. So I can pick this up, go someplace, and have it work perfectly well. And by the way, this includes, it's got some really fancy VPN capabilities in there. So if you're doing actual remote stuff, like at a remote observatory, you can actually tunnel into this router and have it work there as well. The nice thing again is that you don't have to customize your computer settings. So once you set it up, and you'll see we have a couple different ways to do it, but once it's set up, you can use your computer on your home network like I do. I use it for work, I use it for imaging, I use it for processing, then I use it for my telescope. I don't have to reconfigure things, which is really nice. And as I mentioned, and you'll see, we can actually use it alongside the home network and remote access applications. So once I have this up and running, I can actually use my home network combined with this network and do things like blind plate solving, for example. It requires an internet connection to do this. And the way in which we're going to configure this, we can work with any operating system. So this is nothing specific to Windows, at least the sort of the basic connectivity part of it. And you get advantage of some of the advantages of Ethernet through Gemini. So it's a very fast connection. It's asynchronous, which means that it's not waiting around for a lot of other things to happen. And you can also access the Gemini web server, either from your computer or from your tablet or mobile phone or whatever. So it's a really great way to take more advantage of all the things that Gemini has to offer. And we mentioned it's inexpensive. There's a couple advanced features I'm going to show you here towards the end. I'm going to cross my fingers that they're going to work. They were working last time I checked, but you never know. So in this basic setup, I have this little micro router. It's the GLI, I think it's called the Mango. Yeah, it's the 300M mini smart router, but I believe they describe it as the Mango router. And what we do is we connect it to our Losmandy Gemini via this Ethernet cable. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect our computer. Now, again, this is a laptop, but it could be a telescope top computer, a little computer head, or a desktop, whatever it is that you do imaging with. One nice feature that I want to point out right here is that we have an extra USB port on the Gemini that you can power this micro router from. So you don't need a separate battery right now. Earlier I talked in my previous presentation, I talked about the idea that you would need a separate battery, but it turns out, nope, actually you can plug right in and you can use the power directly from the Gemini itself. There is a default address and a default password. This is all covered in the documentation for this router, but we're going to plug it in. And then what we do is use our computer to do a little setup. So we type in the default administrative password. And one of the things, and Simon, if you could just switch back to me for a second, I want to show, so this is one of the things I didn't quite realize until the light bulb went off. This has two ports. This is a LAN port, which is for your computer connection or your Gemini. And then there's a WAN port, which is wide area network. This is typically where your internet modem or something gets plugged in. And I always thought, okay, well, I really prefer and want to have both my computer and my Gemini connected together via wired because it's the most reliable. I don't have to worry about Wi-Fi dropouts, things like that. But I was always unable to use the WAN port. And I'm done with that part, Simon, if you want to go back to the presentation. So it turns out, in a fairly recent release of their firmware, you can actually convert that port into a LAN port. I just circled this piece here on the admin panel. You can click this button that says use as LAN. And now suddenly we're going to have two LAN ports, one for the computer and one for the Gemini. So now we've got a way to connect both of those together and we wire them in. There's a little bit of additional setup that you want to do. And again, I'm in this router administrative panel We're going to set up a little Wi-Fi name. So for example, I use BV Astro. I've got about 7 of these now. So this is BV Astro 7. I know which one I'm connecting to. We can change our password, click the modify button. And then the last thing I do, because now, as you can see on this, I've clicked on my client's screen for this router, and I can see my computer here. This is my BV Threadripper. And then my Gemini device. This is wired in. It's got an IP address, but it also has a MAC address, which is kind of like its very unique hardware address. And one of the things that's always kind of vexed using these types of systems is that the IP address is always changing. And what we really need is we need to know that the IP address we're going to give this Gemini is always going to be the same. So in this setup panel, I'm going to copy, and you can just, of course, click and copy it, but I copy the MAC address, and I go under this LAN IP, and I set up with the same MAC address, a specific and dedicated IP address. I just copied the one that it automatically assigned it. And now this is what's called a static IP address. And this allows me to always use that address. And anytime I plug in that Gemini computer, I know that I always get that address. So this solves this problem of, you're trying to connect stuff in, you plug them all in, then you press the button and it doesn't connect. And the way that you use this now in your Gemini telescope.net application, this is the ASCOM version. And again, there's Indy for Mac and Linux and other platforms. But in the Gemini telescope, I can click on my setup button here, click on my Ethernet, and I actually type in this IP address. That's the exact same one that we just talked about. We are skipping some options that are platform specific, like NetBIOS, which is a name resolution that's specific to Windows. We could use it. If you know what it is and you like it, that's fine. You just use the name of Gemini. But in this case, I like to use IP addresses for all the reasons I mentioned. It works on any platform and pretty much works 100% of the time. So, so now what essentially I have, let me just back up for a second, is I now have this setup working, right? I've plugged in the router, I've plugged in the computer, I've plugged in the Gemini, I've connected them all together, I've set up my Gemini properly. And now what I'm gonna do, I hope this works, is I am going to so I actually have a telescope outside. Fortunately, it got late enough that it's in the shade. But I'm going to go ahead and connect to it. I think I'm actually already connected to it. And let me just show you that. So this is a computer that's sitting on top of my telescope. It's connected to all the various devices here. Here I am in my Gemini telescope. When I click on this, you can see this is my setup, same screen as last time that I showed you in the slides. I can click on this. Here I'm using NetBIOS, but I'm going to change this to the address that we just talked about. Oops, sorry. This is an earlier version of the Gemini, so I hope that works. And when I click to connect it, you can see that I can connect. I'm warm starting because right now I'm shooting M64. So it's been imaging last night and hopefully we'll image again tonight. But now I've got, the ability, so now the computer is connected to the Gemini and I'm actually connected through this micro router. I'm using my desktop computer here and I'm accessing both of these at the same time. So what's nice is I'm taking advantage of my home network for my desktop to connect to this. Now, if I was out in the field, I could do exactly the same thing and not require my home network. I would connect to this micro router. I could log into the computer that's sitting, or if it's a laptop or telescope top computer that's sitting on my telescope. I can be in the comfort of my car, my tent, my trailer. And boy, in Mount Pinos, it sure gets cold up there. So I was glad to be able to be inside my car and doing this. And this allows me to actually not only use all of the capabilities of this computer, but for example, if I'm going to use framing in Mosaic Wizard, which is a feature of a sequence generator, and And the point here is not that I want to kind of talk about sequence generator, but they have this feature where you can type in a target like M101, and it will fetch through the internet. I need an internet connection to access this, right? I need to be able to see this. It's gonna fetch through the internet on one of these image servers an image of M101. And the point here is that I'm using a combination of this micro router, but also my internet connection on the desktop. And I hope it's gonna work here. Of course, it may not. But to access this, this capability. Oh, great, so here we go. So of course I can frame it up, figure out how I'm gonna take a picture. But the thing here is what I'm trying to show is that I'm using a micro router that is, again, completely mobile, but I'm also being able to take advantage of my home network. And this is because I have both a combination of a connection on my desktop computer to the micro router, but also to the internet. And of course, there's other devices that I have connected here. Now, one of the other benefits, and Simon, I'm going to ask you to connect use the camera portion here. But am I on the live here now? Okay. So this is, of course, is our friend Sky Safari. And of course, we like to use our mobile devices and our tablets and things for planetarium type stuff. But I can, in the same way that I'm connected to my micro router, I can use a tablet here. And I'm gonna go ahead, I've typed in the same IP address. I'm connected to the micro router. I'm gonna click connect. Please God work. Oh, it's working, okay. Polaris, yeah, that makes sense. So, so now I have the ability to access Gemini from a wireless device that's not even a computer, right? Which is really great. And of course I can type in different types of things, use it as a planetarium, go to, align, you know, all the great features that I have in Sky Safari. And by the way, it works in Stellarium as well. All these IP connected planetarium apps work great. So, you know, with this little $20 device, I now have an access point instead of the money that we're having to spend on something like Sky-Fi, and I can put that towards other equipment and use my planetarium application. One other thing I want to show, and if you could switch back, Simon, to my presentation here. So I'm going to sort of minimize that and get this back up and running. So we talked about that. I'm going to skip ahead a few slides here that we went through all this. Okay. So we talked about a little bit about using a combination of the home network for blind plate solving, framing and mosaic, something we demonstrated. Then we also showed the ability here for connecting our planetarium applications and so forth. Now this is something that's relatively new, and I haven't shown anybody yet, but I just got this running a few days ago. But you can also add additional devices, such as a Wyze cam, and this is spelled W-Y-Z-E. This is essentially again, it's like 20 bucks. It's really designed or was kind of originally marketed as a low cost, I don't know, like a home security camera, I guess. It's IP capable, it's powered by micro USB, and it turns out that it's got some abilities to do remote connection unrelated to security. So for example, so here is my little device. It's sitting out there, and it supports a streaming protocol called RTSP, which is, I think, real-time streaming protocol, but it has to do with essentially IP-based, or I guess internet-based streaming of video. And what I found is I can use, again, I'm using my my USB port to power this device, and it's connected to that same micro router. So I can use this here at home, and I can take this with me to my remote location, or even use it in my remote observatory. And just to show you that this isn't some trick, I'm gonna try to figure out how to do this here. But I'm gonna go back to my computer. This is my remote computer sitting on top of it. And I am going to open it. And there it is, it's opening. So you know it's real, right? Now, I mean, that's not exactly rocket science, right? But here's the really cool thing. I started to realize now I can record this video stream. So if I run into a problem later with, for example, I was trying to diagnose meridian flips, I can actually rewind that back to the time in my logs that says, hey, you had a meridian flip and it failed, and just watch it and see what happens, or how close am I getting to the pure collision or something like that. Or if I'm really doing remote observing and I want to be able to reset the mount back to essentially counterweight down or home position, I can visually see where I can actually do this. And the cool thing is it's $20. I mean, what can you do in astronomy for $20? Maybe get parking validators. I don't know. But,
you can buy a celestial eyepiece for $20, Brian.
Is that, oh, well, I mean, if you want to buy a Celestron eyepiece, sure, $20. But here's the point, right? And I just want to finish on the camera here. We're talking about some really handy, inexpensive devices, and really, I think, innovative ways to access the Gemini, to do a little bit more remote automation, do a little bit more automated observing, and to get a better handle on your rig. But I think a lot of this stuff can be applicable to kind of anything that you're doing. It just happens to be the Gemini just makes it really quite easy. So that's what I'm doing right now. This is my driveway. That's my telescope. These are the things that I'm using. Fortunately, it's working smoothly enough with these tools that I can get a good night's sleep, and I wake up in the morning. I happen to use Dropbox as a way to move my files over through the night, so I can get up at my desktop computer in the morning and start using my imaging apps to start processing. So that's my presentation. I hope that was helpful and informative. I'm happy to answer any questions either here or just drop us a line at Losmandy. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to talk about it.
Excellent. I'm just going to unmute everybody so they can hear and join in the conversation. I got to say something, Brian. I have not seen that part of the Gemini ever.
Well, Simon, that's interesting that you say that, because Scott and I, until Brian came on board, we didn't really know any of this. We had no idea. Brian has really opened up our eyes and just opened up our customers' eyes to all of the things that the Gemini unit can do. The mount mechanically is a great mount, as everybody has known over the past 30 plus years that it's been in production. But I think this is going to be a really great thing for people out there.
Well, I think to me, this is like a massive game changer in the sense of like being able to control a mount. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of devices out there that do something similar, or you have other ways of setting it up, whether it be a Intel NUC computer or something like that, or these new little fangled Raspberry Pis. But this thing essentially eradicates all of that kind of crazy stuff, with the exception of obviously the cameras and stuff like that. But the way the Gemini system works now has just made it even easier for people to connect. And I think that's the vital part to all of this.
Yes.
Yeah. And I would so the interesting thing is it's all pretty much since the Gemini 2 Mini, which I think must be at least 4 or 5 years old at least. It's always been able to do this. And I just think that there haven't been enough folks or enough resources trying to explain how it works. And that's kind of what Tanya and I and Scott started talking about is, how do we get more of this out there? And how do I explain, not just what I'm doing, but just what's possible? And you're right, Simon. I think it's just incredibly powerful. I was surprised when I first started talking about this, how few Gemini owners actually were aware of these capabilities.
I mean, it's amazing how in-depth the Gemini actually is, especially when it comes down to the hand controller. A lot of people just use the basic go-to sides of things, but there is actually way more to just go-to in the Gemini system than just that. And hopefully you guys will be able to come back on another time to show some of these other cool little features, because to me, there are too many hidden features that just need to get out there so people can see this.
Yes, definitely.
And Simon, I live probably, I think, 5 minutes from you guys, so.
Well, okay, that's straight as the crow flies, maybe, but yeah. So
maybe we should do a Losmandy class.
I think we should. I think that's a really, really good idea. And we should drag Scott out of his bed and have him host this.
Love
I don't
it.
know where we're going to do this at this particular point. I mean, depending on it, we can do this virtually or we can do this in a physical gathering. I don't really know what we're going to do yet. Depends on how we're doing.
Yeah.
I got to ask you this. This camera thing that you're showing right now,
Yes.
I've seen very, very similar situations with this. I'm just assuming it was just a standard IP camera. A couple of people may have noticed that there's that green square that's dancing around.
Yes.
How is that going to be useful to do things like cloud detection? Because it's obviously looking for movement.
Well, look, first of all, I think the real IP cameras have been around and can kind of do this. There's two pieces here that I think are really interesting about this particular setup.
Mm-hmm.
One is this is a $20 camera. Okay, I mean, yes, you can buy an eyepiece, but you can't really buy a whole lot. I mean, let's be honest, right? It's a ridiculously inexpensive camera. The second thing is it's USB powered, right? So that means I don't have to do anything special either to my mount or my power system or anything else. I can literally plug it into my second Losmandy port. And I want to show this again. So this is normally the USB port that you use on the Gemini to sort of control it, but this little USB port here, this is actually a power port. You can use this to power not only this little this micro router, but also this camera as well, right? So it kind of is, it's sort of the same, but now it's available to so many more people and so easily that I really think it's a kind of a different ball game there.
No, I totally agree with you. Let's do a quick question here. Hey, Frank, we know who you are. Is there any plans to do any more updates of the Gemini system, which is actually a good question?
Yes, in fact, although I hadn't planned on talking about it, we are working on a firmware update right now. Some of this relates to a little bit more support of this. Some of it relates to some fixes and improvements that people have asked about over the years. There was, for example, something about in very, very unique circumstances related to the meridian and centering, sometimes the mount would kind of slew off, and we have a fix for that. And then we have support for Alpaca now, which, as you may know, is the ASCOM remote connection capabilities. So I don't want to kind of go through all of that, but yeah, I mean, we are continue to evolve the Gemini. And now that I'm here and kind of really seeing the things that I see it's capable of, I think we're going to start to see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so everybody needs to really get on that mailing list newsletter so you can get those announcements when they're available.
Susie McNeil, is Astronomy Day starting yet? It already started. The minute it turned 12 o'clock in the morning, it was Astronomy Day. So we're all going nuts. So let me ask you a couple of other questions about in regards to the mounts. One of the biggest things that you guys did was to have the mounts come apart with the RA and a declination. For those people who are not familiar with this concept, it's not like the newest thing on the block, but for those people who want to understand a bit more about this, give us a quick rundown on this. Oh, do you want to stop your screen sharing real quickly so they can see you full screen?
Does that work?
Perfect.
All right.
So did you want to talk about that, Brian, or do you want me to go through the mounts?
Why don't you want to start and just to hand it off to me if you have anything you want me to add?
Okay. So basically what Scott did, I think it was my first year here, it was 2016 when he came out with these not configuring mounts, modular mount system. Basically what he wants to do, in his mind, he was thinking, what if you had a different setup for every one of your telescope imaging? You know, somebody has a refractor or a big, Richard Creason or whatever. So he thought you can grow your mount with you instead of having to buy 5 different mounts. You can just have 3. You can have a GM8 deck, a GM8 RA, a a G11 deck, a G11 RA, and a Titan RA access. So those are 5 pieces, but they're all modular. So you can take the deck off the GM8 and put it on a G11 RA access, and then you get a GM8 11, and then your load capacity goes up. And you can use the same tripod, and it's for a fraction of the price. So, I mean, it's a great system. It's working well. People are really getting it. So we've been really happy with it.
Yeah, Tanya, if I could add something to that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've heard as a customer, Scott has often said, this is the last mount you'll ever need. And I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you know, everybody says that kind of thing. But I realize now with this notion of the separation of the RA and deck, that it allows me to grow my mount from, you know, I'm starting with a GM8, which is kind of the most portable mount. It has the least amount of weight capacity. It's still pretty substantial. It's like 40 pounds, I think, of just the imaging side of things, right, Tanya? Is that the number?
That is correct, yes.
So if I want to move to that next step, I don't have to sell that whole thing. I can actually buy just the G11 RA. I can remove the G8 RA, kind of attach the 8 deck axis, and now I've got one that's bumped up in weight capacity. So, and that allows me to go through that. I can do a full G11. I can go to a G11T, which is kind of the Titan version of things. You know, and that combined with what I found to be Losmandy's sort of ongoing and endless support of older mounts. You know, I just saw one come in the shop that was going to be upgraded, and it was from 1993, I think. I mean, we're talking about mounts that are in the field, continuing to be used for 30 years now, nearly 30 years. I mean, that's pretty astonishing to me. And it says that these mounts, you know, when you get into this, it's going to be a mount that's going to be upgradable for you, and it's going to exist for quite a long time.
Well said, definitely. That's Scott's idea. That's his whole idea behind every product that he makes.
And you know, one of the greatest things that I liked about Losmandy's mounts is, and it's funny because I watch Scott when he's tinkering in the background, is he loves to look for different ways to modify stuff. And I think one of the best things that has come of this is the tucked motor is a good example. And when you're buying any Losmandy mount, you don't just buy a mount and that's it, you know, off you go. It's you buy a mount and you just never know what comes out of Scott's head. And suddenly it pops out and it just gets implemented.
Simon, that's a great point. And in fact, interestingly, that's how Scott and I met, because in my earlier G11, where I didn't have the tucked in motors, through my own fault, I didn't tighten down the clutches. And of course, my telescope flopped over and banged it in the motors and smashed them. And I needed to get them repaired. And, you know, at the time I didn't, you know, I was terrified. I thought I completely destroyed this whole thing. And Scott was very, very nice to me. And, you know, for a pretty, I forget the amount, but, you know, maybe a few $100, he replaced the motor parts and so forth. But at that point, you know, he mentioned that he was working on these tucked in motors and would I like to try them. And I did. And of course, it became the tucked in motors we have today. But later on, you know, we talked about the idea of spring loading the worms, because I was kept saying like, you know, well, I keep having to sort of bias the weight on these mounts so that the RA, you know, gears keep engaged. And, you know, a couple months later, it's like, hey, I want you to try out this spring-loaded worm, which, you know, allows us to do imaging basically in any part of the sky without having to worry about adjusting anything, even adjusting the backlash and things, which has been a tremendous help, especially if I'm trying to do automation, right? And I don't want to know at 1 o'clock I got to get up and, you know, move some weights around, that kind of stuff. And there's more stuff coming. You know, Scott and I are paying attention to what's going on, and, you know, Scott's throwing out a lot of ideas, and I'm sort of testing and refining them and talking to a lot of customers about what we're doing. So I think you're going to start to see a lot more of that kind of stuff coming down the pike from Losmandy.
Awesome. So here's the big question that everybody loves to ask. Will you do any other colors?
Well, we've gone back and forth about that. We really have, and it's not a never. We're never going to do it. It's a possibility, of something, you know, we could do. But I mean, there's new stuff coming. So just like I said, get on our mailing list and everything. And there's new stuff. So it's all exciting. Like I said, it's great to have Brian on board. It really has just helped a lot of things. So
Simon, what color do you want?
What color do I want? You know what?
And you better not say mango.
I think I've asked Tanya this before, believe it or not. I actually really wanted a Titan, but unfinished.
Like a raw, bare bone metal look?
I remember asking Tanya a long time ago if that would ever happen. I know Scott was like umming and ahhing.
What was my answer then?
It ain't gonna happen, and it probably still won't happen because try get a Titan right now.
Right. Titans, I don't think you're gonna be able to, I don't think Scott's ever gonna make those again as of yesterday. But we never say never. But like I said, just stay tuned. We have some neat stuff coming. Just not ready yet. So maybe our next show that we do with you, we'll be able to introduce something new. So, but
yeah, we're not allowed to say anything about this new toy.
We're just, you know how Scott is. He likes to make sure everything is correct before.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, he's really good about that. So I'm always like, let's jump on the gun, let's do it right away, you know. And he's like, no, Tanya, you slow your roll.
But no, in all honesty, I know it seems really odd when people ask that. Is like, do you do different colors? It's one of those things. It always has been amusing. But you know what the funny thing here is, though? I could always tell a Losmandy mount a million miles away, not because it was the jet black color, is when, you know somebody who's been using it, it has this really interesting aubergine color to it sometimes when it's faded out slightly.
Yes.
And to me, that was like, that's a Losmandy. And you just instantly know. And that was one of the cool features. It's not a feature, but it's one of the cool things that I loved about that mount was it's like, oh, this is kind of neat.
I have a friend who images near the ocean in Malibu, up the coast from us. And I asked him, he's got a couple Losmandys. He's got some other stuff, he's got like Stellar View and some other things. And I asked him, are you worried about the sea air at all? No, we're 1,300 feet, blah, 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 blah. So, some 5-6 months passed, and the mounts and also the Stellar View stuff that's anodized black is a copper color. I mean, like, it looks high-end copper color. Like, I got to take a picture and send it to you. It's really remarkable. And I asked him again, are you sure you don't think the sea air has any impact? And he kind of, well, maybe, but you're right. It does have sort of that interesting sheen as it ages.
Yeah, but the thing here is, though, the anodization part of the entire process is actually a vital thing. You can't just leave an exposed thing out there without having some kind of treatment, because, of course, you will get some kind of oxidization occurring. But that's another thing that a feature that you guys kind of don't really hammer home is, you got to remember, these mounts are built to be used outdoors. That's another big deal about some of these mounts that you guys have. They're not overly technical. There's not plastic parts in it. There's not all this, useless bits and pieces that can get destroyed by heat or the sun or whatever. It is a solid construction.
And I think that's why we see them continuing to be used, 20, 30 years on. One of the things that I do is I often will pull a mount that's come in, and I'll just measure its periodic error, just sort of see how it's performing. And there was another one from 96, came in for some upgrades rather. And I measured the periodic error, and it was well within tolerances of a mount that we offer today. And I was like, this is, to me, just as a imager, and that to me was pretty remarkable that a mount can go on that long, and didn't seem like it was particularly well cared for. I mean, I don't want to say like it seemed unused, right? It clearly had been out in the field. But, I think that says a lot about Losmandy being the last mount that you're ever going to need.
Totally. So before we wrap up with this, Tanya, it's not just telescope mounts that you make over there, is it?
That is true. We do have another division. Which division are you talking about?
Porta-jib.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, we do have the Porta-jib division where we make camera support equipment for the film industry, broadcasting industry, and the fashion design industry.
Yeah, so you know, again, I've told this story countless times. I work in the Hollywood TV and film industry. I've actually used the Porta-jib before in the past, not knowing what it was, and I never put two and two together until I walked into the building one day, and
wow.
I'm just like staring at it, going, "This looks vaguely familiar." And I just couldn't put it together. It was in my head. It was just like, I remember the spider dolly. I remember the Porta-jib. I remember like a handful of things that we were using on a production because we all wanted to get one because it was like all the rage back in like 2006, 2007, back in that time frame. And then while I was shooting an interview with Scott, I'm like staring into the corner going, why have you guys got this stuff here? You know, are you guys doing a production or something? Was somebody filming here? No, we manufacture it. I never put two and two together.
Yeah, I know. Well, a lot of, it's funny, Brian used to also be in the film industry, but you don't find a lot of people that mix the two. You know, it's not a lot of astronomy people. A lot of them are not in the film industry. We don't get a lot of customers from that, you know. But yeah, that's been going for Scott for a long time also. It's been going very well for us. Thank goodness we have the telescope division right now during these times, because we would be dead in the waters if we only had production.
Yeah, I know, that's where everything's shut down. I mean, it's funny to see the folding HD tripod even show up in regular productions, because it's actually quite a revered tripod.
Oh yeah, all that equipment does very well. I'm surprised to see how many feature films and that we're on, and so it's pretty fun. A lot of reality TV shows and stuff that we do. So
yeah, so for those guys who are watching at home, this just gives you an idea of, you know, Losmandy isn't just putting together a bunch of telescope mounts. He actually has a very long history when it comes down to engineering and things like that. Like I said, I had actually interviewed him, and there is actually a video. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to play it, but it's up on our YouTube channel. You can listen to Scott go on about his life story, which is absolutely enthralling and fascinating in so many respects, because we very rarely see the man.
And he kind of likes it that way. You know, he's a pretty private guy, but, you know, he loves machines. He loves tinkering. You know, Simon, you came in the shop and there's a lot of antique machines, you'll notice, not necessarily computers and things, but machines. And he has a real respect for, well-machined devices and things. So, you know, he's designed all of the mounts here. We build everything in the USA. You know, it's 100% Losmandy, and Scott takes a tremendous amount of pride in that, and that's really where he likes to spend his time.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to play this video. Hopefully it doesn't run too long. I've forgotten how long it is, but I'm waiting for the next person to dial into the chat soon. So, Tanya, Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. This was great to do.
Simon.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have the next big thing, I'm sure we're going to drag you guys back in, because we love having you on this stuff. We love working with you guys. And remember, if you buy a mount, any Losmandy mount, it has to have the Gemini 2 system, obviously. We at Woodland Hills will be giving you a free GPS unit. No other person has this. It's just us. We are giving this to you as a gift if you buy a Losmandy mount with the Gemini system. All right, so we will be back in about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to roll this video with Scott. If you've never seen this before, it's been up on our YouTube for quite some time now. So if you haven't seen it, then do sit down and watch it. We will be back in hopefully 10-15 minutes with the next speaker, which is Chris, talking about Canon and how to shoot in the dark and the light, I think it was. I don't have the schedule in front of me right this second because I'm talking to you guys still.
It's going to be one of those two, right? Light or dark?
I'm probably doing both as far as I know. All right, guys, we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much. Bye.